Hello there. This subject that we're going to talk about now changed my whole life. Again, it was the turning point in my career when I first learned this. And every mistake I've made in sales is when I forgot this. And we call this relationship selling. The dean of the Harvard Business School once wrote that all selling in the future will be relationship selling. And I see some of the biggest companies in the world with salespeople representing billion-dollar products and services actually bumped out because of the poor personality of the salesperson, because of his or her indifference to the quality of the relationship. Interesting, by the way, in politics, do you know who wins the election? The ones that people like the most? Even if they're just watching them on television, the ones that people feel that they would like most to sit and have lunch with or have dinner with is the person who wins, irrespective of all philosophy and debate and everything else. The relationship is everything. Now, selling has changed dramatically in the last few years, from a rapid, impersonal process where you see as many people and so on, to a slower, people-intensive process. Today, everything is people. It is individual men and women that you talk to making buying decisions. So the heart of the sale today is contained in the quality of the relationships that you form with your prospects and customers. The very best and most successful salespeople are those who are the most capable of entering into and maintaining the highest quality relationships with people who can buy from them and recommend them to their friends and associates. In fact, the number one word to describe the most successful salespeople worldwide is the word nice. He or she is a nice person. Now, in this session, you learn the key elements of relationship building and relationship selling and how you can apply them to every part of your sales activities. Today, everything in work and sales is relationships, from getting a good table and getting good service in a restaurant all the way through to every part of your life. In fact, 85% of your success and happiness in life will be involved with other people and be determined by how well you get along with other people or not. Now, in society today, increasing levels of high tech leads to increasing levels for high touch to maintain balance. If you start off with low tech in the middle, as you become higher and higher tech, you must become higher and higher touch in order to balance this need. Sometimes I ask, what percentage of people's decision making is emotional and what percentage is rational? And my audiences will give me a variety of numbers, 80, 90, 70, 60, and so on. And I say, no, people are 100% emotional. People are completely dominated by their feelings. They, first of all, decide emotionally, and then they justify their decision rationally or logically. Emotions are everything. Now, the friendship factor is the key to all success in selling, is that all top salespeople are described by their customers as being their friends as well. The company's most valuable asset in the marketplace is its reputation, how it is known to its customers. Again, this work out of Harvard is important. Your reputation for your company is more important in making sales than anything else. And your most valuable asset is the same. It is your reputation. It is how you are known and thought about by your customers. It's how they feel about you when they see you or when they think about you. That determines everything they do with regard to you. There are some key facts about sales relationships. First, sales relationships are hard to form because of the amount of competition in the marketplace. You can't just go out and say, I'm going to form a whole bunch of relationships, because people are skeptical, they are suspicious, they are busy, and relationships take time to form. It takes a lot of interaction between two people before they start to feel comfortable with each other. Now, the next point is that relationships, once formed, are easy to maintain if you pay attention to them. So they're hard to form, but they're easy to maintain. Almost like spinning plates. Once the plates get spinning, you can keep the relationship going as long as you pay attention. Now, the decision to buy is the decision to enter into a long-term relationship with you and your company. We sort of say that it's like a business marriage. When you ask the customer to buy your product or service, you're asking the customer to get married, to enter into a long-term relationship. Now, once a customer buys from you, several things happen that are really important. First of all, the customer becomes dependent on you and your promises, like in any relationship. And customers don't like to be dependent for a very good reason. You see, all customers have been burned in previous sales relationships, so they're naturally skeptical. They've been sold the wrong product at the wrong price by the wrong person. The product has broken down, they've gotten poor service, and they wish they had never bought it at all. So therefore, even if they like your product or service and they like you, they're slow to make a decision. Now, there are a variety of alternatives available to your customer to satisfy his needs. This is a critical factor in the market. The customer doesn't have to buy from you. In fact, a good friend of mine was lecturing a group of business students, and they said, what are the most important factors that will affect our lives in the future? And he said, there's 3 factors. They are competition, competition, and competition. So here's the rule. The customer wants a relationship first before he or she seriously considers your product or service. You could sort of imagine going out on a date with a member of the opposite sex. Before you start talking to the person about your car and your house, the other person wants a relationship. They want to get to know you. They want to feel comfortable with you. They want to have a back and forth with you. So therefore, the very best salespeople go fast by going slow. And at the beginning, they make no effort to sell at all. It's called selling by not trying to sell, at least at the beginning. Now, the law of indirect effort, one of the great principles of relationship, says that the more you focus on the relationship, the more the sale will take care of itself. But the more you focus on the sale and not the relationship, the less likely you are to get either one. In making the buying decision, the relationship is actually more important to the customer than the product or service that you sell. You see, your product or service is available in other places, but the relationship is only possible with you. And in lots and lots of research of the keys to successful salespeople and companies, they came up with a term called customer intimacy. And they found that customer intimacy, the customer feels a special relationship with you, is the key to high and predictable and repeat sales. This is why it's so important to take time to form a relationship and then make sure that you pay attention to it so you don't allow it to drift away. Now, one of the biggest problems in business is indifference. And when they interview customers and they say, why did you leave this supplier and go to that supplier? The number one reason is indifference on the part of somebody in the company. Indifference is taking your customer for granted. This is the main reason for lost customers. It's not prices or even quality or competition. It's just that you didn't respect the customer and pay attention to the customer. You weren't sensitive enough to the customer. And I've had this experience myself where you go to a place several times and they're very nice to you, and one day you go and they treat you with complete indifference. They treat you like they couldn't care if you came at all. And what happens is you go away and you never come back. So it's really important. Keeping a customer is much easier than getting a new customer, and much, much easier than getting that customer to come back. So customers use the same words to describe top salespeople in every industry. The first thing they say is, he or she works for me. I feel that he or she is sort of like my employee in this area, only I don't have to pay them. Another thing that customers say about top salespeople is, I view him or her as an unpaid member of my own staff. I can call on him or her at any time for help or service in this product or service area, and he or she will give it to me without charging. Another way that customers describe top salespeople is, I view him or her as a consultant, as a friend, and as an advisor. Because I don't see him or her as a salesperson at all. I see him or her as a person who gives me good advice to help me improve my life or work in some way. And the final thing that they say, very common, is he or she really understands my situation. Why do you buy from that person? Well, he or she really understands my situation. I've worked with him or her for a long time, and he or she really knows what I need. He or she really knows my situation. Once you get that positioning in the heart and mind of your customer, they will never go anywhere else as long as you treat them well. Now, the key to relationship selling is trust and credibility. The larger the sale, the more important the relationship, because there's a greater risk. The more people who will be affected by the purchase and may be happy or unhappy, the more important is the relationship. The longer the life of the product, or the longer the length of the decision to buy, the more important is the relationship. Now, for a first-time buyer of your product or service, the relationship is extremely important, because the first-time buyer is the one who is the most concerned about making a mistake because of their lack of knowledge and experience in your product or service area. You see, the key variable in modern selling is risk. And a good relationship lowers the perception of risk on the part of your customer. And this brings us to one of the most wonderful breakthroughs in selling. This is basically a career maker for you. I call it the new model of selling, and it's my own invention and contribution to the profession. It's the key to sales success. Now, in the new model of selling, what you do is you imagine a triangle, and the triangle is an upside-down triangle, and it's divided into 4 quarters, or basically 4 parts. The first part of the new model of selling is trust. Trust means establishing a high level of trust with the client, and it represents fully 40% of the sales process. So if you're looking for how much time you allocate with your customer, you spend at least 40% building the relationship. Now, the second part of the new model of selling, the triangle, the next part down, is identifying needs accurately. You take the time to be absolutely clear about the customer's needs and problems, and this is fully 30% of the sales process. Now, in identifying needs, you ask really good questions of the customer, and then you listen closely to the customer when the customer talks without interrupting. When you ask good questions about the customer and listen closely, you build trust. You expand your knowledge of how you can best help this customer, and you start to move inexorably toward the sale. Now, the third part of the triangle of selling is presentation. That's the next 20% of the sales process, is where you show that your product or service will satisfy the customer's needs. But this is only 20% of the new model of selling. And what we have found is that the highest paid salespeople engage in a process called matching. Now, matching is where they match their presentation to what the prospect has said he or she wants or needs or is concerned about. The salesperson only talks about what the customer has said are of interest to him or her. The salesperson doesn't talk about everything the product or service will do. They focus in on identifying the needs of the customer and selling only to those needs. Now, the last part of the triangle of selling, the new model, the bottom part, the last 10% is closing the sale. Closing the sale, however, is quite easy if you've done everything else. If you've built high levels of trust, if you've identified needs clearly so the customer understands them, and you have made a good presentation that matched your product to their needs, the closing is very simple. It's almost like reaching up and plucking an apple off a tree. You just need a little bit of a tug, and it comes off in your hands. And it only represents 10% of the process. Now, the most important rule in relationship selling is this: listening builds trust. Let me repeat that. Listening builds trust. Talking does not build trust. So how do you get a chance to listen really well? Well, first of all, you ask good, well-prepared questions. You see, amateur salespeople walk in and they say whatever they can think of, whatever falls out of their mouth. But professional salespeople structure their questions. They write them down. They study them almost like the line of a play on Broadway. And they're very careful, and their questions are provocative. They elicit good information, and they give them a chance to listen carefully to the answers. So once you've asked a question and the customer begins to speak, listen attentively to the answers. Lean forward. Don't interrupt. There is nothing more flattering to a customer than for you to lean forward and nod and listen, and make no attempt to interrupt. There's nothing more insulting to a customer than for you to keep jumping in and adding and tripping the customer when they're talking. The highest paid salespeople in the world are not great talkers, they're great listeners. So here's a rule: nobody ever listened themselves out of a sale, but people talk themselves out of sales all the time. So now once you've listened and the customer stops talking, pause 3 to 5 seconds before you reply. Give the customer a chance to think. Give the customer a chance to revise their thoughts. But by pausing, it gives you an opportunity to consider carefully what the customer said. It enables you to hear the customer better, and it enables you to avoid interrupting the customer if they're just organizing their thoughts and planning to continue. Remember, pausing and allowing silence in a sales conversation is a powerful form of building relationships. All people who get along really, really well have developed the ability to be with each other in the quiet. They don't have to talk all the time. They talk and listen and think, and they create silences. Now, the next part of listening is to question for clarification. Questioning for clarification requires that you ask the question, how do you mean? How do you mean exactly? If the person says this and that and something else, instead of jumping in with an answer, you just say, well, how do you mean? Each time you ask the question, how do you mean, the customer will expand on the question. Human beings are conditioned from infancy to answer when somebody asks them a question. And when a customer says, well, the price is too high, you say, how do you mean? Or I can get a better version from your competitor. How do you mean exactly? And the customer will give you more information that will help you to make the sale eventually. Now, here's one final point with regard to questioning for clarification, is that the person who asks questions has control. Let me repeat. The person who asks questions has control. As long as you're asking questions, the customer will be answering, and you have complete control of the sales conversation. And as you listen, you build trust. And as you build trust, you start to move closer and closer to the sale. The next part of listening is to feed it back, to paraphrase what the customer has just said in your own words. You say, for example, well, let me make sure I understand what it is you're looking for. Or let me be sure I understand what your concern is, or why you want to do it this way. And then you repeat back what the customer has said in your own words. This is often called the acid test of listening. This is where you prove to the other person that you were really listening closely to what they said. Now, here's another powerful technique, is have a notepad open, and when the customer is speaking, make notes. Customers love it when people write down what they're saying, because it means that you think that what they're saying is important. If you think that what they're saying is important, it means you think that they are important. If you think that they're important, their self-esteem goes up and they like themselves more. When they like themselves more, they like you because you're the one who's making them feel so good about themselves. And you get all of those benefits from asking questions and listening and taking notes. Now, here's some rules for building high-quality relationships. The first is that the sale begins when the customer says yes. When the customer says yes, this is when you have to work even more to make sure that the customer is happy and continues and concludes the sale. Remember, for most products and services, there's a 72-hour waiting time where the customer can cancel the order. So when the customer says yes, this is when you go to work even harder to make sure the customer is happy. Now here's a second discovery. When the customer agrees to buy from you, the customer feels that you owe him or her something. It's almost like you owe them a debt because they've done you a favor. Your account with the customer is now in a deficit position. So what do? What you have to do something nice to thank the customer, to cause the customer to feel that you are now even. So what do? Well, you do something quickly to reassure the customer that he or she has made the right decision. You send a thank you note or a present immediately. You send a thank you email even before that. You pay even more attention to the customer than before. Don't make the mistake of making a sale and then just forgetting about the customer. You really work hard to take care of the customer after the sale. And then you set up a regular callback schedule and you follow that schedule. Call them once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. Ask them, how often would you like me to call in on you to make sure that everything is okay? And they'll tell you, well, if you called me once every 2 weeks, that would be great. You can send them an email, send them a phone call or a voicemail, or once a month or so, you can actually drop in physically if the sale is big enough. Now, everything in selling today is relationships. It's 85% of the sale. So your job is to become a relationship expert. All top salespeople are really good with other people. Top salespeople know that the quality of the relationship is determined by the amount of time and energy that they invest in that relationship. The only way to increase the value of a relationship is to invest more time in that relationship. So top salespeople are always looking for ways to reassure their customers that the relationship is important to them. The more emphasis you put on your sales relationships, the more sales you will make and the more successful you will be. Now, here are some questions that you can ask and answer to apply these ideas to your sales activities. Question number 1. Give 3 ways to increase the friendship factor in each sales relationships. What are 3 things that you could do to become a better friend to each prospect or customer? Number 2, what are the 3 most important parts of your company's reputation in your marketplace? What are the 3 best things that your competitors and that your customers say about you when you're not there? Number 3, give 3 reasons why customers are reluctant to enter into sales relationships with new salespeople. Why do customers hold back? Obviously you know because you're a customer and you hold back for the same reasons. Question number 4. Why is the relationship more important to the customer than the product or service in a competitive market? This is a great question. Number 5. What are the 3 most common reasons for lost sales? You must know the answer to this and then make sure that you're not guilty of the answer. Number 6. What are the 3 most common words or expressions that customers use to describe top salespeople? And number 7, what are the 3 most important benefits that a customer enjoys in a high-quality relationship with a salesperson? What's in it for the customer to form and maintain a high-quality relationship with you? And finally, what 1 action are you going to take immediately as a result of what you have learned in this session to build and maintain better relationships with more people?